Can I start with the news?
Sure. What's the news? Oh, yeah, the news. Yeah,
The news.
great.
This is good news.
Yep.
So, people have probably seen some of the posts if they follow us at all. Or maybe not, because people are from all over.
Yeah.
But
Like you mean on social media?
on the social medias, across the interwebs,
Yeah.
two of the guys we train, the twins, I can use names.
Yeah,
People
for
knows,
sure.
yeah. Ryan and Connor McPherson, fraternal twins, just in case anyone's interested.
Yeah.
They look like they're not related at all. They just committed to University of New Hampshire, Division One.
Yeah.
As would they be 16 by now? Yeah,
They're
16,
05 birthdays. They're
05
16,
birthdays.
17 anytime.
which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
In our area, especially coming from Canada, whatever. Kids normally will commit around 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
When they're coming from Canada, the odd guy when they're younger.
Yeah.
And these guys, they earned it. They did a great job. So I just want to give them a quick shout out.
Yeah, they worked really hard. They're good hockey players, man.
Yeah,
they're
great.
I've known these kids for a long time because they're the same age as Charlie. So they grew up with Charlie. Different teams though, and but Charlie and them trained together quite a bit, and they were always good kids. And they're one of those families that the parents had some common sense and would ask questions. Hear what you have to say, not debate. I don't mean that in like they should or shouldn't, but they would we'd have conversations about, what did they do next, but it wasn't crazy back then.
Right.
But as it got closer to their draft year last year, which they were drafted the Ottawa 67s, dad and mom kept their head level and made good decisions with their kids. They're good parents, good hockey parents. And the kids came in here and for years and years and worked hard.
Consistent, man.
Yep.
Consistent work, for sure. They're great kids, too, man.
Oh, they're great kids. I was very, very happy for them.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see that come through.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get too hung up about where they're going to be playing and all that kind of stuff. They just played well.
Yeah.
They played well.
That's actually one thing I would point out about these two in particular is their attitude. And I wouldn't say that they have like an overly positive attitude, but they are positive, more positive kids to be around. They're never like moping around. They got some energy to them. They talk.
Yeah.
They get involved.
Yeah.
But that's a good way. Very level, like the whole time. Whether they're playing well, whether they're not playing so well, their behavior, their demeanor is always relative. At least from what I've seen in the last couple of years being in here. Yeah. But man, they've been consistent. They've put in the work, especially the last couple of years. Been really, really working, trying to get better, and they still have a lot of room to grow, obviously. And now, as we always say, the work just begins now that they have a new opportunity that's come up because it funnels again, right?
Yeah.
At the next level.
Which is very funny. I was just thinking about it. So obviously last year or the last year when they were playing, that would have been when COVID started and they didn't have much of a season, not much at all.
Right.
And what happened with a lot of the kids is some may have gotten drafted in the OHL a little bit earlier because of hype from the previous year. Some kids would have got drafted a little bit later because they didn't get seen enough. And it was kind of not a guessing game, but it was a
weird year, man.
It was a weird year. So you could miss on a few and you can hit on a few. So in my opinion, they got drafted at least a few rounds later than what they would have, I believe, if they would have played a full season against, top teams and stuff like that. And so, but my point of that is that there's a lot of kids that didn't get drafted or got drafted later than they thought they should have. And it's a sob story, right?
Yeah.
You put your tail between your legs and it's like the poor me and it's not fair. These kids were tickled pink, if that's a thing, to get drafted to the Ottawa 67s, and they had a legit chance of being there next year. Well, they had the options.
Yeah.
So, but what did they do? They went out and they just trained, worked hard, and long-term vision, and doors started opening up. And then the doors were actually, the floodgates were opening up for these guys because they were playing so well. It's all about your attitude. It's all about work. And that's what they did. So this happy for them.
Yeah, congratulations to them.
Yeah.
And
isn't it like, wasn't it great when Dad came in?
Oh,
it's the greatest
this
thing,
guy, people.
But this is this is why I get so fired up about doing what I do, and you too now that you're doing the fitness and stuff. It's like you can train kids, and you do the daily thing, and when it comes to fruition and you see potential in someone and you see the work and you want good things for people, which I do for all my students, and especially if you lay it out on the line and you actually work hard. But when you see dad come in and trying to hide it, like, yeah, we got it. You can't.
Yeah.
You're so pumped. And I know you say it with me sometimes. It's like with my son, like, I got a new jacket the other day with, and I thought I'd never wear one, but it's a good jacket and it's got my son's logo on it. And I feel like a hockey dad, but you can't hide it. You're happy. But to see a family so pumped, like they didn't see New Hampshire. If you would have, like, I asked the dad that, I said, did you see, you probably thought school. You pictured a school, you pictured playing NCAA maybe, or the OHL or whatever. But did you ever think it was going to be New Hampshire Wildcats?
Yeah.
That's sick. Like, that's a great school.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I didn't think that.
Yeah.
And just so happy because the thing is, and I said it for him, I said, dude, you've, not that you've accomplished it, but you're watching your kids play at the pinnacle. Everything after that is a bonus, and that's up to them. But as a parent, every hockey parent says it, right? Not every, but so many hockey players say, if I could just get my kid's school paid for, it's done. And he goes, I know.
Yeah.
It's sick. It's absolutely sick. And I'm really happy for them because I think it's probably the right decision for them because of in the stage of development and the type of kids that they are. I think it's the absolute best move for them to go there rather than the OHL. So, because a lot of the times I really love the OHL. I love it. I think it's great. It's been nothing but a good experience. Like, shouldn't say for me, it's good. And now the way they've made changes in the league and there's so many good positive things about it. So when my son was making his decision, it was OHL. He was like an OHL guy. But these guys are. It's the right move to go to NCAA. I think they're going to develop. They have a couple more years to develop and become the players that they're supposed to be. And I'm freaking thrilled about it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Freaking awesome.
It's great. And so I'm really looking forward to the summertime too, man. When they're back, the next summer we're gonna have a freaking lineup in here, man. I say it all the time. We're gonna have some really good players. Working here in the summer, which is gonna be great. Speaking of that, so these guys that just to touch on the program again, in next month, the program's going to be coming out. It's going to be a little later than I thought because the amount of work that it actually is. Yeah. But it'll be out. And this is going to be
program.
Yeah, the fitness program. This is going to be the same program I do with these guys in the summertime. Yeah. So obviously, if you're not in here with me doing it, I make modifications and things on the fly based on what guys need more or less. But this is going to be the template of the program I do with these guys that are in the OHL and going to NCAA. So it's a good program. It's going to be there. It'll be on the website. And then same thing if you want more coaching stuff, if you have to be a member on the site to get that. So that'll be out next month. So keep an eye out for that. And I think that's all I got for website stuff.
I'm going to add something to that.
Sure.
For players out there, we've talked about this a lot. I'm not going to put a ton of time in. Like, I'm not going to go to rinks and film people. But if anybody actually, like, I'm going to qualify. If you're playing U3 and, we can't talk, but if there's players out there that have questions about their game and you want to send me some film, some clips, not highlight goals, clips of like 8 shifts, 10 shifts, or clips of a few games. If you would like to go over that, just send us what do you call it?
Anything, a message, an email,
a message or something like that, and I'll let you know how to go about that because I'd be happy to do that with people. Yeah. Just to see. Now it's not going to be details. Just I'll look at your game and say, here's a couple of things that I see that you can do better, or a couple of things that I see good habits, bad habits, and stuff like that. So if anyone's interested, just send it out, and we'll get that on the website too at some point.
Yeah, and here's just a tip for kids that are listening as well. So here you have a guy he's an NHL skills coach. It's his job to do this. So one piece of advice I'm gonna give to kids in particular, because parents write in too sometimes, but kids that write in questions, do your best to write an actual thoughtful question when you're writing to us, because we'll answer your question.
Yeah.
So a lot of times kids will write in some kind of general, do you have any tips for me? I'm a U16 AAA player trying to get to the next level.
Yeah.
It's like, do I have any tips? I have a lot of tips for you, but I don't know you. I don't know anything about you. I don't know anything about you as a player, your circumstances, or anything. So it's like what I end up doing is I direct them to the podcast. I just say, look through the topics that we cover and find what applies to you. Start there, and then if you have more specific questions, then come back. So if you're going to do the video thing with Andy, here's a guy that's willing to spend time looking at it. So present the package to him in a way that makes him want to help you. So if you send a 4-hour game where he has to sift through and find your shifts, that's going to make his job very difficult. So it's not hard to chop up clips. Everyone has a phone. Everyone has made a TikTok. Everyone has made a video. You know how to chop clips up. Get your shifts together, and then write like something thoughtful about your game. Actually sit and do some reflecting before you just send it in, because that will make it easier to give you appropriate help if you give some context to what you're sending in. If you just say, hi, Coach Andy, you said I could send my shifts in. Here's 3 games. Yeah. It's like, that's making it
what number
difficult.
are you?
Yeah, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So try to have some thought behind your questions and your messages that you're sending us, because we'll answer. We will answer. And if you want actual help, that's going to be good for you. The more specific you can be, the easier it is to give help. You know?
And again, just to qualify that, if you do it, don't just send me your best shifts ever, because that's not very helpful. I mean, it's good to see your strengths, but we want to just see a natural, how you play the game naturally.
You
know,
that's it. Right on.
So that's that.
So over to you now.
Over to me. Before I go into the Yarrimer Jaeger stuff, it just jogged my memory from yesterday. So, we just talked about the McPherson's dad, how level-headed and just a good dad, let things happen. He wasn't crazy dad. We were speaking about one of my crazy kids the other day. Not crazy kids. So how this came up, I got a kid that played, I coached, trained forever, coached, and his dad was just over the top, like did some bad things, but over the top. And he would get so frustrated at little things like, he's got all these breakaways and keeps shooting at the glove. If he does that again, I'm quitting the team. Stuff like that. It's like, how the heck does that have anything to do with anything? Anyways, over the top. If it wasn't perfect all the time, if you weren't winning all the time, the guy would lose it. And if he didn't get 3-4 goals a game, the guy would lose it. So anyways, his coach now, so he plays in the American League. So he was drafted, I don't want to say the team in case people know who it is. Drafted in the second or third round draft second, third round. They got traded to a team on the East Coast. Anyways, his assistant coach was, who I trained as well, was in shooting the shit yesterday. And I asked how's he doing, because he coaches him. And he goes, great player. But he goes, man, he gets a lot of breakaways. He just can't score on breakaways. He's got to score on them and stuff like that. But anyways, it just jogged my memory of for a couple reasons, because he was the kid that he was a stud. He was a stud, whether his dad understood or not that he didn't have to come to me 4 times a week and 6 hours a day sometimes, but he would get out as much as he possibly could, and it was unnecessary. And it was one of those situations where his dad thought that the more I push and the harder I am and the more perfect it is, it's going to change. Like, that's good. It's going to do it because he's got talent. He had talent. So anyways, played in the U.S. national team for a couple years. And what I saw was he was doing this, and he was a really good player. His dad saw him as like the Sidney Crosby type of guy, but it's not. He's a great player. And then when dad had to let go of the reins and he moved away from home, he's a great kid. He didn't do anything wrong, but now he didn't have dad breathing down his neck and worrying about how he performed. And he became the player that he is, which is a good player, not a superstar. And it is what it is. So that theory that we have of once they leave home, they're going to do and act, and they're going to be what they are anyways. Yep. So it was very sad for me to watch this awesome kid, awesome hockey player, have a dad that was an absolute nut bar. And I'm talking top of the food chain nut bar dad. Yeah. And the kid just wanted to play, and he was good. And, so that he's making money playing hockey, and he's a very good hockey player, but it's not what his dad wanted. And
well, it goes to what we were talking about last week, right? Like, it can appear like you're making a difference when you're dad. It's just, I can't believe how true that is. That was like an epiphany I had over the last couple weeks. Yeah. Just if you're doing all of this stuff, it can really, honestly and truly look like you're making a huge difference when they're in minor hockey. Yeah. It can really look like that. If you're willing to spend the money and drive the miles and go all over the place to do all the extra stuff, extra tournaments, pay for the best trainer, the best coach, whatever. But as soon as the day comes when you can't do that anymore, which it comes for any player that's moves on to a higher level, now it's just up to the player again. So it's just a good example of that. So you got to keep that in mind when you're parents, and you can see with McPherson's, like their dad. I don't know if, I mean, you have more experience with him than I do, and he doesn't strike me as the type that would. What's funny is a comment he made when you guys were talking after, because he was coming in to tell you about how the weekend went when they got offered and all that, and he was saying like, man, I was thinking like I knew they were like pretty good players, but are they that good? Because, and he was kind of like, you could just see the humility taking it as dad, right?
So there's a dad that actually played university hockey. He's not a dummy. Right. He has some hockey experience. He knows the game to a pretty good level, to be honest. Like, I would say if you took 100 parents in here, he probably knows it top
more
5.
More than the average dad.
Top 5.
Sure. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And but this is the thing. He was watching his kids and he thought they were pretty good, but he didn't go nuts on it. There's a guy that actually knew, whereas you get the opposite, where people look at their kids that are maybe just okay, or they are pretty good, but they elevate them like they're the greatest thing, like they walk on water. But it's like, no, like, so the kids will do it, man, not mom and dad.
Kids got to do it, man. That's right.
Yeah, you know. So kind of on that topic is there. Here's a guy that did it on his own. Yeah, this is so cool.
Yeah, this was cool, man.
So there's a fella by the name of Jaromir Jagr. All right. You didn't get a chance to really watch him, right?
No.
And if you did, it was
the tail end. His last couple of years was in the NHL was when I started paying attention.
I'm going to try to make this. This is so interesting to me, and it's so interesting to me because he's 3 years younger than me. So he just turned 50 years old last week, I think it was. And because he turned 50, there was a lot of news on him and like, wow, this is amazing. He's
still playing
50 years old and he's still playing professional hockey.
First Czech league.
The first league
high
in
level,
the Czech.
Man.
Absolutely. He actually owns the team as well.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, Jagr turned 50, but it was only a couple of years ago that Eki was playing with him, Aaron Ekblad in Florida. And Welly played with him in Philadelphia. Yeah. So I have a little bit of context to this too, right? So the other thing I find interesting is he's 3 years younger than me. So when he was making it, I was kind of just like at the tail end of mine, okay? And he was a star, and he had the mullet, and it was like, so this guy couldn't speak a lick of English whatsoever. So I spent the last little bit like really intrigued by it because it's really relevant to me because it's my era, and he was a stud, like a stud. So I'm trying to think, like right now I feel like a mosquito in a nudist colony. I don't know where to start. I'm excited though.
Yeah.
Okay. But he's still playing hockey. Now, if I can put that in perspective, I'm 53, and I told you the other day, it was like, I wasn't playing NHL, but I was doing my camps and, on the ice a lot and stuff. And I told you it was probably 2-3 years ago, I felt, oh, you're not fast anymore. Yeah. You don't have that pop. You argue with me, but I know I just don't have that pop. 50 is hard to be playing hockey, especially elite level. So just a couple quick things. Eki was talking about, like, I say, how's Jagr? Like, how's he making out? Like, can he still play? He goes, yeah, he's at this point, he goes, he kind of does his own thing. He doesn't follow any system. He just goes and does his own thing, and he wants the puck. He goes, this guy, he goes, he's got a key to the rink. He goes and skates at any time he wants, not because, like, it's to actually work.
Yeah.
So he's got a key to the ice. He's done that every place that he's played, I think. And he's also got a key to the gym. He needs 24/7 access. So he goes, the guy is just like, his bottom half is just a tank, like strong. He gets his big ass out there and protects pucks. So that was Aaron talking about it, right? And then it was Welly saying that when they were in Philadelphia, it was the same thing. He goes, this guy, he just works out all the time. He says, yeah, he'll go out. Like, we'll go out, guys will be having a few drinks or whatever, and he's drinking water and has a good time a little bit. But then he goes to the rink or he goes working out. Okay, so that's like the start of it. So these are, there's probably a couple other guys I worked with that played with him, but this is like the basis of like true information, like one-on-one with guys that played with him. They said he's nuts. Like, he'll go through sticks before a game and no. Oh yeah, he'd take 1 out of 100 and then send the 100 back, right? Like just real particular. And I guess
Yeah.
he was real particular about his skates and his equipment. And he's a hockey nerd. Okay, so that's that. What am I talking about? Okay, he's 50 years old. All right. What I love about this is what I'm going to talk about is how dedicated this guy was to his sport. Okay, so because it's a really fine line, because we can all talk about, just focus. So I sent Charlie a video yesterday. I said, you got to watch this, man. I said, because when you think that you're working hard and you think that you're dedicated, just watch this. He grew up in a farm in Kladno, Czech. Okay, back when Czech was communist. So he said that the only way to make a better life for yourself was to be a sportsman or a musician. He said, I can't sing worth a shit, and he didn't want to, right? But he looked like a rock star. So he took that really seriously, and he said it was either work all day on the farm, and he goes, that's hard work. So what he did is he was playing sports. It was kind of hockey and soccer, and Czech were the big ones, and he took to hockey, and he did hockey. He said, this is my way out. So that's a different mindset than most Canadians, North Americans, people that live on a nice thing. Now, the advantage maybe he had was that he can skate kind of all day and like hone his craft as much as he wanted. But that was kind of true for...
So could every other kid.
Yeah, well, not necessarily in North America, because we had to go to school. Okay, but I got an argument for that. We had to go to school. We had certain parameters that we had to live by, right? And you had to pay for ice and all that kind of stuff. So maybe might have been a little bit different. He could play on any team he wanted. You can go up and down. So those were maybe some advantages. But how many kids actually take the advantage?
That's what I mean, right?
Right?
Everyone has an advantage at some point in some way that they either take or don't.
Yeah.
Right?
What distraction gets you away from that?
Yeah.
There's a lot of distractions. So he just didn't have the distractions. Some of the stuff that he did as a pro and continued to do is I wrote a couple down. 30-second sprints on the ice with 40-pound weight vests and ankle weights on. So I showed you some of the videos that he was doing. It's phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
So he puts a 40-pound weight vest. He's got like probably 1.5, 2-pound ankle weights just to make it hard. So Dalton Prout got me on using a weight vest to do the hill and just to add that extra.
Yeah, I want to kill yourself.
When you put 15, 20, 25 pounds on you, Dalton does 60-pound weight vest, 30-pound weight vest, whatever. It immediately, as soon as you start taking steps, it's just like you're out of breath. So when we do our sprints and stuff, it's like it's exhausting. It's so taxing. This guy goes on the ice and bags himself. So what it's doing is it's working his legs, like obviously, like it's just so much heavier to push that extra 40 pounds around. So he's a 230-pound guy, so that's 275 pounds up and down the ice. And it also is just your conditioning. You can't breathe. So he did this. Then he finishes it with one-timers. Pulling on hotels, like when they go on the road, he makes sure his strength coach, he'll call him in the middle of the night or whatever, but he makes his strength coach bring rope, like a rope, and he pulls him down the hallways, like drags him. So coach is hanging on, and Yaromir goes down the hallways of the hotel dragging his coach because he feels like he needs to do it. Then he does little things like 1-minute bike sprints as hard as he possibly can, 1 minute off until he can't do it anymore. And this is like not once in a while. This is like daily. So I showed you yesterday the one video that I found of him in Czech, and he's training, and he does 10 exercises. He does this all the time. 10 exercises where he has that weight vest, got the ankle weights, and he does 10 reps of these. They don't look exhausting, but even if you do it without the weight vest and you go half-assed, you can't breathe,
man. Yeah.
So he was going through these 10 drills that were absolutely like you wouldn't want to do it. And then he does things like shooting pucks. So when he does the practice stuff, he calls them pancakes. So they're about the size of this. 1 sec. Right? And they're like weighted. So I'd say they're probably a pound or pound and a half. And he gets passes and he shoots with them and keeping his hands in front, and he shoots them just feels like that's better for him. What I like about this is it's all self-driven. So when we're kids or we're players, most of us have to be told and coaxed and, don't do too much, don't do this. I'm not saying this is right. What I love about it is that he would listen to his body and he would say, I need this. I need to dial in this piece or else I don't feel good. So he made drills up. And he said, I've never had a trainer. He goes, I make drills up that I feel are going to benefit me. So it reminded me of like when I was a kid. I'm not Jeremy Yeager. It reminded me of myself that I used to have a really good intuition on what I could do to help myself. So I would train and shoot pucks, and I'd ask questions, right? If it felt right, it was right, and if it didn't, I'd like, okay, I don't like that. So that was kind of cool. When he was playing the NHL, he was able to score goals like in close and all that kind of stuff at first. But once there was a turning point, he was 34 years old, he said. And he said he didn't have a good one-timer. He goes, he realized he needed it because the game changed and it was a lot faster and time and space was taken away. So he goes, at 34 years old, I didn't have a really good one-timer, so I started working on it, and I'm pretty good at it now. But really cool because he put the time in, recognized there's a deficiency, and he just, now I need to do one-timers and get good at it. So the pucks come off his stick real one. Neat things that he did a lot of one-handed stick handling with those heavy pucks. So he'd do something maybe just on his forehand the whole time, one-handed shooting and stuff, because it really makes sense. And you notice that when I do stick handling, I don't know if you've been out to a lot of those where I do a lot of the one-handed stuff to get your top hand control. Yeah, I used to do it with you. Top hand control to get used to that. One things I liked about it, because it's something that I teach the kids. I was just saying this to a kid last night. He uses the heavy pucks for shooting, like the heavy pucks. And he said, the reason I do this is because I find a lot of guys bring their hands back. And it don't seem so simple, but people don't do it. He goes, when people bring their hands back and they wind up on a wrist shot or whatever, he goes, and when you do that, the goalies can see it and you don't have enough time and space. So he practices with those heavy pucks, hands in front, and just snapping. So at any point, the puck is on a stick and off it goes. Yeah. And if you ever watch some of his games now, if you see him in the offensive zone, stick is always on the ice, and he's trolling around like this, waiting for pucks, so that when it comes on, when it's on a stick, it comes off as fast as it got there without thinking, right? So it's a trained thing. So the other thing is I wanted to say about that is many people look for guidance on how to do things, but a lot of the times, if you can just go inside yourself and find a way to make yourself better. Yeah. And again, I'm so impressed by it because he didn't do this for a month or a year or a week or a minute. He dedicated his whole life to, I need to be better. Yeah. And doing things hard for a long period of time. And I just think it's cool. A lot of people, I don't even know how many people would even come close to doing even a little bit of that for that period of time. Yeah. So anyways, I digress.
Yeah. I'm going to link to that video actually that you showed me yesterday, because it was cool to see like the training method. So a couple of things just to sharpen up I think what your point is on that is this is stuff that worked for him, and like you said, it's not that necessarily this is what you have to do. It's like last week we were talking about McDavid using PEP and Matthews using 3-on-3 and whatever. Like these are just things that really good players used as tools. So you can look at them, but you have to keep in mind it wasn't just this that made them what they are. So we're not saying you have to go skate around with a 40-pound weight vest for your practice every time.
No, it might even hurt you.
Yeah, it might even be too much.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing to pull out of this is he had that mindset of asking questions and figuring out what he needed to do and why really early on. Yeah. You started to ask why about things really early on. And one of my favorite examples you use for yourself is you would use that story about when you would shoot pucks, and if one would come off really nice, you would say, oh, like, why did that come off the stick nice? Like, what did I do there that made it work?
Yeah.
And he's just demonstrating a lot of that. It's a lot of that. It's like, okay, so I can see the game is changing. I don't have a one-timer. It would be much better to have a quicker shot that I can get off fast and hard than, that usual Yager style.
Yeah.
Turn back and forth figure eights in the corner for 5 times until you can walk out and get a shot or whatever,
Right.
Because the game is different.
Yeah.
So I think what people can take from looking at a guy like this is, one, that dedication piece, of course, and doing, what he felt was necessary to keep himself sharp and able to play. And whether or not it was too much, it's like the guy's still 50 and he's playing. It's like
he could be a freak.
That means something, yeah. But it means something,
But he built himself a base,
right? So this is
really young.
So this is what I mean, and all of the training stuff he did. The other thing I want to point out is it wasn't just a mindless beatdown all the time. You know, he like some of it could seem that way where it's like, yeah, I was using a 40-pound weight vest and I would bag skate myself and I would run down the hallway, drag my coach. Those parts of the training were a beat down, but then he would work on his one-timer or stick handle with one hand, or he was doing things that were thoughtful actually to make himself better, not just beat down every time he was doing any kind of training.
Yeah.
You know?
So one of the things I'm going to dial it back a little bit here. The one realization he had was I need to be very strong, but not bench pressing. He said never doesn't do that. Yeah. He knew that his hips down needed to be just really strong, especially for the way he played. So he identified the way he played, and he knew that base was going to be good along the boards, that long body. Yeah. I can separate pucks, players, right? So that was one. And then like you said, he didn't just do beat down. So he was just showing some of the stuff he did. Like he would break down some of the moves, how he played. So he's really into how he, obviously, which is good. He's really into, this is how I play. I need to train for how I play, not the way.
That's right.
Not the way Mario plays.
Yeah. Right.
So he would break down, okay, I've got a long reach. And let's say this one-on-one move, I come in, go to my backhand. He was a left-hand shot. So he goes, I'm big, I can get wide, I'm long. So if I can get long and then use my strength to shield a guy off, and watch how many goals he scored like that. But he did it in slow motion and slow as smooth as fast, with a real purpose. He would do things along the wall and where he'd bounce pucks off, and he'd already have his separation speed or separation from people with his big ass out there, and work on those moves. Those aren't really fast moves or fast drills. They're just thought methodical and applicable to the game.
Yeah, that's right. And
building habits.
And that's what I want the takeaway to be from the story you're telling. Because obviously, like anyone who's amazing or has some kind of elite, whether it's a training thing or someone who has an elite mindset about something, those things are amazing. And you can get sucked into watching it as entertainment. Like, wow, this is so amazing. But there's a lesson that you can pull. And the lesson is exactly what you're saying. It's you figure out how you play, and then what you're doing when you're making drills and training stuff, the way to make it individual to you is by identifying specifically where you need the work. And that's what he was doing. You know, whether it was his conditioning and strength, which is definitely a component of it, or whether it was skills in the corners, picking pucks up off the wall, puck protection, making sure each arm was individually strong enough to handle the puck on its own. Like these are all things he identified that work with his type of game. And that's what anybody can do that. Anybody can analyze their own game and figure out which things they need to work on. And then he had the intelligence enough to develop his own drills. But luckily for people today is you don't have to be smart enough to develop your own drills. You can go look up drills that are applicable to you in whatever situation. So you don't necessarily even have to have that creative piece where you are just smart enough to figure out the drill you need to do or to plan the drill you need to do. You can just go find one. But it does take that critical thinking we always talk about, that self-awareness to be able to analyze and then go and do it for yourself, you know?
And that's something Dalton was very good at, Dalton Pro.
Yeah, exactly.
Is like even he'd do those hard-ass workouts and skate and all that stuff, but he was like, okay, I need to have stronger hands. If I fight, or I need grip strength and all that kind of stuff. And prevent them from breaking and all that stuff. So he had the rice bucket. He would do that. And he would do, he was showing us stuff with the fingers, how to build the arms and the burn, and you're doing absolutely nothing. Just right. But and then his thought process was about how the neurons from the brain to the outer limits of your of your extremities and all that stuff never get touched. And he goes, if you don't work these things, this is an intelligent guy.
Right.
These are guys that think, and then they always will have an advantage on you because they're in endless pursuit of excellence, and it's impressive.
Yeah. And for a guy like Dalton, it was the exact same thing. He was doing things that were applicable to him, that he needed for himself, the way he played his style. And I'm going to go into this because I know you wrote this down. You were going to bring it up at some point, but I'm going to bring it up now because I think it's appropriate. As kids, we talk about how there's so many elements to whether it's a drill or a workout or whatever. There are little opportunities within each where you can work on something specific to you. So a lot of kids and a lot of people in general think they need the most individualized program specifically tailored to them. And that would be optimal. That's the best thing. If you have a trainer that can tailor a program specifically to you, that's great. Or an on-ice private session where you can do everything specifically tailored to you, that's obviously optimal. But it's not realistic for most people. Most people either can't afford it, or the person that's there doesn't have enough knowledge to do it, or whatever the case may be. There's no whatever it is. But what you can do is you can take a generalized program and you can optimize those things that are specific to you. So that you can do that in a workout or on the ice. So I was talking, or you brought up a drill yesterday. We were talking about one of these drills that you do where there's like 8 pieces to this drill that every player is doing every time. And you were saying, you know, some guys half-ass the first pass, float to the next station, don't focus on getting the shot off quick, don't focus on getting their feet moving out of turns, don't focus on the first 3 steps quick when they get that puck, trying to hide it using all these little elements of the drill that are there. And kids will just mindlessly go through the drill without actually trying to focus on that. And this is how you can individualize a program for yourself. Yep. So if Coach Andy says, okay, guys, here's the drill. Here are the 8 pieces of this drill. Maybe you are really bad at 2 of them, 2 of the 8. So when you do the drill, you should be focusing on those 2 things. Yep. Now all of a sudden you're taking a general program and you're individualizing it for yourself. Yeah. Because you're making something a singular focus. And you can do the same thing in the gym. If you are really strong, but you're not fast, well, when we do a contrast pair where you're doing a slow move and then a fast move, make sure you're focused on that fast move. Yep. Make sure you're exploding with maximum intent every time. Now you're taking my general fitness program for 16 to 18 weeks and you're individualizing it for yourself. So you don't need to have something 100% customized to you. You just need to be able or be smart enough or have enough self-awareness or that critical thinking to make those pieces individual to you. Yep. And that's how you get better. Yep. And this is, I'm going to transition into that in terms of training for sure. Well, but that's exactly what you can do if you're given something general and you're thinking, well, it's not made for me. It's like, make it for you. Yeah. You can make it for you.
Like, so I agree 100%. It's like, I'm a big fan of just doing, like, I'm a big fan of doing something that you believe in anyways. So for example, there's also a fine line of doing too much so you don't recover.
Yep, for sure.
But let's just say you're in a really hard program. Like it's that time of the year you're doing a lot of the hard stuff. If you're someone that lacks, let's say, speed or quickness, doing 5 20-meter sprints, like flying 20s, 2-3 times a week extra, that's not going to hurt you.
No.
That's going to help you.
That's right.
So that's something you could do. Or if your conditioning is, you're not in the phase of where your conditioning or your endurance is real good, it's not going to kill you to get on a bike and do something.
Yeah, or steady state, low intensity something.
Or to say, I got to get my push-ups in, or I got to do mobility. I'm going to go at home no matter what. Every night I'm going to do some mobility to make sure I'm limber, right? Mind stuff, whatever. So that's up to you. Yep. You don't have to, like, the coach and the trainers and all that stuff. That's not their job to without going nuts.
Well, okay, but here's the other thing too, is I truly believe that you do need to go, in a sense, overboard to figure out where your line is first.
100%.
Because I feel like a lot of kids and parents are actually worse than kids, is they think they're very concerned about doing too much.
Yeah.
And they'll start to pull back before they've done enough.
Yeah.
You know, so I think
you don't know what hard work is.
You don't know. And even like yesterday, I was trying to explain to a kid that was working out in here, I gave him a rep range of 6 to 10 on the one exercise we were doing because they're young and they're still learning. So I give them a lot of latitude in how much they're going to have to push.
Yeah.
So I said 6 to 10. So I watch his set, and his 10th rep, the dumbbells were moving as fast as his first rep.
Yeah.
So I asked him, because he doesn't know to ask himself yet.
Exactly.
I said to him, was that set hard enough? I asked him, and he looks at me and goes, yeah. Like right away. Yeah. I'm like, okay, what makes it hard enough? Like, what do you think is the criteria of whether or not something is hard enough? And he's like, well, it felt like it was starting to burn. And it's like, okay, but the dumbbells didn't slow down at all.
Yeah.
So to me, that indicates there wasn't a lot of struggle with that.
Yeah.
So if you're going through a set and I say 10 reps, you should not be able to do 11 if I paid you for it.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
That's what pushing means.
Yeah.
But if you never let yourself get to the point of having to push, then you don't know what that means.
Exactly.
So people are always err on the side of let's dial it back before they've even done enough in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, and especially when you're an elite athlete, I would much rather have to teach someone to dial it back than to have to teach someone how to push
100%.
and try hard. You know,
100%.
and this is where again the
Because
brain.
when you're young, you can always eat more.
Oh, for sure.
You can always
man.
make up a little bit of sleep here and there.
Absolutely, because you have the latitude, you have the time to do it. You know, and so that's why that piece of it is really important. Because you know, you look at a guy like Yager, and was he going overboard? If I don't know enough about actually what he was doing, but to me it sounds like it was probably too much. Like he could probably
100%.
afford to dial it back a bit.
Yeah,
but he wasn't doing too little. That's for sure.
That's right. Yeah,
that's
sure.
Right.
That's right.
So I think that's another important takeaway.
Yeah,
and
were you going on that still? I wanted to just go back to that drill that we were talking about the other day. Yeah, because I want to be, I want to kind of talk about it just a little bit because it's going to apply to fitness too. So when we were talking the other day, I had the conversation with you that it blows my mind. And first of all, I understand that some kids are 12 or 10. These guys aren't, but 12 and 14 and 16 and even 18-year-olds sometimes. I understand that they don't understand what focus is. I get that. You're distracted.
Can I interrupt for a sec?
Sure.
Because I was going to say this too. I forgot to say it. I'm saying this as a kid who didn't do this when I was in my teenage years. I always came and I worked hard and I knew I needed to focus. But in terms of dialing in on a specific thing that I needed, I never did that.
Right.
I never did that. And this is me looking in hindsight, identifying that thing I could have done better in that area. And to your point, I can totally understand that kids don't. But the reason I didn't do it is because no one told me.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
You just didn't know.
I didn't know. Right. So then this is the point of us trying to do it. I'm not from my perspective saying I did all this stuff and you guys aren't doing it or whatever. I didn't do it. And I'm trying to help you avoid the mistake kind of thing. So I totally can relate to the kids on the ice being mashed potato brains and not thinking about it, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry.
For sure. No, it's good. It's like there's several areas of my life and my business and my hockey that I wasn't totally committed and totally focused. Like I get that. I get that. But I'm just saying, if you really want to be better at the game, then it takes the commitment and focus. So it frustrates me sometimes, a lot of the times, all the time, when kids don't like a drill is a drill. Like I always say that. So I take the time every drill. Like, so in this one, it was a passing, shooting, and a movement with another shot, and in between there's some skating. Okay, like keep it real simple, not too complicated. Yeah. So like as you said, guys are like kind of just, I start the drill, the pass, and it's like whatever, the pass got there. What? But I'm very, very clear on the drills, because a drill could be a drill, but I give intention and everything. So I'll say, this is the first part. Nice crisp pass. After that, get your feet moving as if you're in a quick start or jumping up into the play. Guy that gets the puck, I'll give them instruction exactly what type of shooting I would like. If it's a standstill, and then I want you to take 3 steps in and get it off quick, that's what I want. Or if you're moving, I'll give you a specific shot depending on which side you're on to do, so that we're working on something with intent. I also say, pick, like, and I say this all
every time you
pick a spot on the net where you can get, it's your go-to spot. Hit it every time. Just don't get close to the net. Shoot to score. Be precise, right? Anytime that you slow down and have to speed up, pick your feet up and go. Those 2-3 bursts of speed. All these things, I give them specific stuff, and a lot of times kids just don't see the importance of it.
Right.
Okay, so let's say I'm not your coach, and I say, let's just say the freaking horseshoe, okay? Because everyone knows what the horseshoe is.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, do the horseshoe. So you as a player can do the horseshoe, and it could be done half-assed. It could be just like a warm-up drill or whatever. But how can you make the horseshoe drill as a player? I'm just saying, as a player, if the coach doesn't give you all kinds of directions, now you have to say, how can I make it good for me? How can I get the most out of this drill? I'm going to get 10 reps at this. So number one is maybe when you're standing there and it's about to be your turn, maybe your head's up and you're looking around, right? When you go, it's like, it's a crisp pass, or you find a different angle to give a guy so that your mind's thinking a little bit different, but different angle. Maybe it's a bank pass. And when it's time to go, the first thing you should be working on is your first 3 strides. Like it should be bang, bang, bang. So that when you do 10 reps, you've done 30 purposeful strides. Yes. When you're doing this, making sure your angle, stick on the ice. Like there's little things. And then when you're shot, you're shooting precisely. Are you shooting, you're shooting for precision, and you're shooting with a purpose, like feet are moving. Are you hiding the puck? Like just in the easiest, shittiest drill that anybody can do, you can extract. I like that word better than take. You can extract 4 or 5 things that you can actually get better on that drill that'll make you a better hockey player.
That's right.
Because there's so many times in a practice where you're passing a puck to someone. How many times are you doing that in a practice? Some of them don't seem like it's that important, but if you do it excellent, you become a good passer. How many times in a practice do you have to start? Right? You're like stop, start, whatever. If you actually have the intent of working on your quick feet, like 1, 2, 3, every time you start, you're getting a lot of quality reps in, and that's where your skill level exponentially grows.
Yeah, and I think kids don't think of their practice time as training. Like this is another thing.
Right.
This is another thing that you can do just in your team practice every week is you have so many opportunities in practice where you can turn it into training, you know?
Yeah.
And this isn't to say, again, like we're trying to keep it reasonable. Like we're talking about kids here.
Yeah.
So we're not saying you have to be a freaking robot and every single move you make has to be perfect. We're not saying that, but even if you can focus on one thing, even if you can focus on 2 things for that practice, like, you know, you said you would mention to Charlie, like, what are you going to work on at practice today? You know? And one real simple one that I think of is because I remember I used to do this. There'd be a drill where you're lined up wherever you're lined up. And before the whistle goes for you to go, you'll start floating. You'll start floating up.
Yeah,
so
you get a head start.
Yeah, so you're already in motion when the whistle is blown, and now you're taking away an opportunity to work on the quick start. I used to do that all the time, right? You just start floating because you're not thinking about work on this here, you know. And there's a million opportunities like that during practice. So if you can just identify one
thing
and you're working on,
totally fine.
You know, even those meaningless passes. If you say, I'm going to make sure I hit the tape every pass, because think about the situation of passing in a practice. For the most part, it's no pressure, where a guy's not super far away from you, or maybe he's in motion and you're making a 2-line pass or whatever it is, a longer distance pass, and you just think, okay, there's no consequence here to missing. I have no pressure on me. I should be able to hit every single one of these passes. And if I don't, I should ask why. Why did I miss that one? What was the issue with that? You know? But it's hard to have that focus, especially, you know, you're in line with your buddies and guys are joking around, you're chirping each other, you're poking each other with your stick and all this crap. But if you can just take a little bit of that opportunity, even just a little, that could make a big difference.
That's what I'm saying. Obviously, when I went through that drill, there's a whole bunch of things, and you should be that focused in a drill because actually you're paying me and you should actually want to get that much better. But if you're doing a drill like in practice or whatever, it's like you really do want to take one thing. One thing. Just one thing for the day. It's not overwhelming. You know, for Charlie, it was at one point I said, what do you think that you probably could use a little help with? And he goes, kind of like speed in the neutral zone. So I said, why don't you work on that in practice? Every time you get the puck, it's all out, you know, get some crossovers in and work on that acceleration through the neutral zone, because the neutral zone makes highlights, right? You're a threat if you have good neutral zone speed. And then it was shooting, like, you know, all these little things. And then, but you're right, you throw one thing in, one thing.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm gonna start to swing it into the training thing now, because on that point that we were just saying, it's super important that you try to have as singular a focus as possible when you're training. So that doesn't mean you can never combine things or have multiple goals when you train. But if you want to optimize something, like training is always trade-offs, right? So if you're focusing, I'm thinking more in terms of off ice, but it applies on ice as well. If you're trying to optimize one thing, that means you can't be trying to optimize other things all the time.
You have one ass, you can't ride 2 horses.
So unless you're doing non-competing tasks, which is like you can focus on stick handling and then having a good shot at the end of a drill, you can do both. But you still now have to focus on 2 things and not one. So now you're dividing resources. You're dividing how much energy you're putting towards your focus, right? So it's important to try to have as singular a goal as you can. But again, you can have combinations of things if you want to. So when we're talking about hockey training in particular, I think the two ways that you break training down in general, the 2 like big umbrella categories would be like training for aesthetics versus training for function. I feel like, is that fair to say?
In hockey?
No, in life. Just
life.
Training in life.
Yeah, there's a big difference.
Right?
Big difference. Like, if you're training for hockey, I didn't understand this a long time ago. I would say, well, that seems easy. When when I'd see band work, you know, a lot of the mobility stuff, like the real extreme warm-ups, like the warm-ups that we do now, didn't understand how. I'm like, okay, well, seems like a waste of time. Just do some jumping jacks, right? But it's like the critical piece.
Yeah, it's actually the workout.
Yeah, so the guy that is a bodybuilder or is looking good for the beach, or just like not a function, not using it for any function except for looking good, they don't understand that. They would never do that, right? So the workouts are completely totally different.
That's right. So from those, so here's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get people who are going to be a hockey player or even an athlete, really. I'm trying to get you as specific as possible. So here's how you're going to break it down in your head. So we got aesthetic training, we got, let's call it functional training, right? Yep. So we're going to be in the functional category, not in the aesthetic category. So that's your first breakdown. Now the second one is you actually a long while ago when we were talking about this, we broke down to 3 further categories in the functional training space, and that's you're either exercising, you're working out, or you're training.
Yeah.
So if you're exercising, this would be like your average Joe workout, right? You're just trying to be active.
Yeah.
So that's exercise.
Yeah.
Workout now has some more intention, more specificity, to use a term.
Mm-hmm.
And normally I'm going to say it comes with more intensity when you're doing a workout as opposed to exercise.
Yeah, and it's probably more of a focus.
That's right.
There's a reason for it.
Right.
Even if it's for aesthetics, you want a bigger chest.
That's right.
Bigger arms.
Yeah. So. And then further from that, now we're getting into training where it's like we have a specific goal in mind. We're trying to work on a specific thing.
Yeah.
So that's another 3 ways that you can break down what you're actually doing when you're in the gym. Are you exercising? Are you training? Are you exercising? Are you working out? Or are you training?
Yeah.
So for hockey, again, it's going to end up being training, working out and training, because especially at the beginning, it'd probably be more just a general, like a workout where you're trying to develop everything. Mm-hmm. But as you get a little bit older and you get a little more experience, now we're training. Now you need to try to optimize certain things for you, like we were talking about this whole time, right? So once we get into, let's call it athletic or functional style training, there's a whole bunch of different modalities that you can work out in. So I wrote down a bunch here. These are just a few. So you have continuous training, which would be like your aerobic based training, steady state cardio type stuff. Speed play. So this is that fartlek training that you mentioned to me before, which I can't believe that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But this is a combination of interval and steady state, which is hockey. Hockey's like that. Then you have just interval training, which is fine. You have flexibility and mobility training, weight training, plyo training, speed, agility, quickness training. These are all different modalities that you're going to be training in as an athlete.
Yeah.
So in order to optimize, I got 8 here. In order to optimize one of the 8, you probably can't optimize another one of the 8.
Yep.
So you can do some combination training, but if you want to optimize one of these 8 categories, then you have to be focused on one of those 8 categories. That has to be as singular a focus as possible when you're doing your training for hockey, right? So if we're talking about hockey specifically, the way that I order hockey training in terms of order of importance, we talked about this before too, is you have your aerobic capacity training, the ability to go forever and not get tired is the way I like to say it. That's your number 1 in order, number 1. Number 2 would be your injury prevention, mobility type stuff. So you're not getting hurt all the time and you can actually move functionally when you're playing. And then strength is number 3 for me. Mm-hmm. So those are probably your 3 like pillar categories in terms of hockey. Other sports could be a little bit different. Most of them are probably around that kind of idea as well, though, unless you're doing Olympic weightlifting as your actual sport.
Yeah.
But for most sports, that would probably be a similar.
Well, yes and no. If you're a offensive lineman, your
right,
cardio is not so much. So
you
would spend a lot less time in a steady state cardio.
Yep.
And you might spend you might spend time on just the movement from the stance to getting up quick and coming out. Like you might do that hundreds and hundreds of times in a day. And then you want to do things that you're so powerful and fast within 3 feet.
Right.
So that training is 100% opposite of someone that needs good conditioning.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah.
So here again, you can you see that you're just pointing it out again. Like you need to be able to identify what you actually are trying to do. So if you're the offensive lineman, does it make sense to spend the majority of your time working on 50-meter sprints?
Not a chance.
Not really. Like that seems like
you'd never do it.
You won't do it, right? And it's not that you can never work on sprints, but you only have so much time and so many resources to use, right? Yeah. So you have to be smart about how you're using your time. So I'm going to go through the 8 categories I just went through again, just so you know what they are, because then you can start to identify how to optimize these. So if you're talking about continuous or steady state training, so this is your aerobic base training. So this would be your ability to keep your heart rate elevated for an extended period of time without stopping. So this is like longer duration intervals, not a lot of rest, and you're just kind of in a flow continuously. And it would probably be something that's no resistance. This would be like a steady state cardio type of thing. Now for hockey, this is something that everyone needs, because whether you're on the ice for like 30 seconds, a minute, minute and a half, that doesn't seem like a long time, but you need to sustain it for a whole game.
Yeah.
So if you take a 2-minute break between shifts, your heart rate's not coming down.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to sustain that elevated heart rate. So there's one modality, and you're going to train a certain way to do that.
Yeah.
You know, the second one, the speed play. So this is combinations of intervals and that steady state where you have elevated heart rate and then you're mixing intervals in. Yep. So you can train for that as well. And this would be stuff that at practice, like you're doing, for example, or in the game, that's exactly what's going on. Circuit style training, you're going to be doing a combination of resistance stuff, endurance stuff. So you're going to have some weighted exercises and that continuous nature to it. So there's another one. That one is less so, not that you should never do it, but this is kind of less so what you would be doing in a hockey environment. But still, it's another modality that you need to train.
It's another phase.
Interval training, obviously for hockey, every shift is an interval, so that makes sense. Anything like that, weighted or not weighted. Flexibility and mobility. So this one, if you're working on flexibility and mobility, this shouldn't be something that where you're super crazy out of breath or you're doing things without a ton of rest in between. This is supposed to be slow, methodical, where you're thinking through your movements. So one thing I always say to the guys in here when they're working on flexibility, mobility is move slow, take your time, and actually try to feel and think about how your body is moving to get yourself in the proper position. You want to be able to organize yourself in the right position.
Yeah.
And if you're in a rush doing it because you think I need to be moving fast tempo all the time, then you're not optimizing that type of training, right? Weight training. If you're trying to train for strength or growth, then the key on this one is, again, it's resting properly in between. If you're trying to get stronger, if you're trying to get bigger, then you need to be able to push towards your maximum outputs. If between sets you're taking 30 seconds of rest, then your maximum output is going to be diminished because you're not recovered in time. Yeah. So if your goal in your workout is strength, then you need to optimize for strength, meaning you need to take the rest. It's not a rush, you know?
Well, it's a big thing with that. It was if you're in the strength phase, guys, if you're used to sweating because, go to the hockey rink, did they work hard? It's bagging yourself. But then in pure strength training, it's actually going to seem like it's not that hard, except for when you're doing your reps. Mm-hmm. Then after that, you get a very long break, actually. And if you're doing it any other way, you're not maximizing strength.
Yeah.
The goal is strength.
When the goal is strength.
Not to beat yourself down.
That's right. Plyos, same. So plyos is more like jump style training. So everyone has, when you're doing hurdles, box jumps, stuff like that. And this is another thing where if you're trying to work at a max, so you're trying to output the maximum power you can when you do plyos. That's what you're trying to do. To do that, again, you have to be able to take enough rest in between. So if I say do 5 reps of this box jump exercise that we're doing, I want every rep to be maximum output, maximum. That means that if you need going into each set, you have to be rested to do that. If you don't, then you're not getting your maximum output, which means you're not pushing the line of what your maximum output is further along. Yeah. So if I say, okay, you're going to go do this plyo thing for 30 seconds and then rest for 5 seconds, well, your next 30 seconds is not going to be very good because you're still tired from the first 30 seconds. Yeah. So if your goal is to maximize your power output, doing a plyo movement, and you can use plyo movements in the context of a circuit.
Just in case anyone's saying plyo is a weird word, it's plyometrics.
Yeah, plyometric
just so
training.
Anybody, so there might be a couple.
No, yeah, for sure. So if you're doing that style of training, you're trying to optimize maximum power output, then that means you need to have the rest. Now, like I was saying, you can do it in the context of a circuit or a continuous flow, but that would mean you're trying to optimize the continuous flow style training or the circuit style training, not plyometric max output power style training. You can't do both. Right?
Yeah. Well, so just a little bit of context to it, the dumbed down version.
Yep.
So plyometrics is just simply like your elasticity to bounce back, to hit the ground and bounce back. Like it could be your upper body.
Explosiveness is another term.
But it's a very quick movement. So as Eric said, if you're fresh, like warmed up, but fresh, you have that elasticity, you have that rebounding, you have that quickness to you. But if you're tired or if you're not recovered, then obviously your elasticity, your bounce back is going to be a little bit slower. And
Yep.
if you're working the plyometrics, you actually want to do them very well. So there's a reason for
That's
it.
right.
So appropriate rest in between is appropriate.
Yeah. And the same thing goes for the last one, which is speed, agility, quickness. If you want to increase quickness, if you want to increase speed, if you want to increase agility, the goal of the workout is not a beatdown. It's not something that should be, you're so gassed and you're going to get tired. It's not that you're not going to get tired, but you need to have enough rest so that you can work at your maximum speed. You can consciously focus on maximum quickness, or your direction changes. You can focus on doing that with maximum intent. If you're too tired, you can't do that. Yeah. So training for speed is not the same as training for continuous steady state type of movement where your heart rate stays elevated. It's not the same. So not everything should be done in the same way. So depending on which of these modalities you're training, that's going to determine what type of rest is really what it comes down to. What type of rest are we taking in between? What type of focus do we have on this? Whereas if you're doing a circuit style training, sometimes what I do is I just set up a brutal circuit, and the point of it is get through it.
Yeah, it's not about anything.
Yeah, and I actually don't really care so much. Yeah. Obviously, provided that your form is mostly intact. Yeah. But am I trying to have you optimize your form? No. Am I trying to have you optimize your mobility in this? No. Yeah. Are we optimizing speed? No, we're not optimizing that. It's just, this is actually now a beatdown. That's the point of this workout.
Yeah. It's to have your heart beating out of your chest and your spleen coming out your left ear.
That's right. Try to get through it. That's what the workout is for.
It's almost a mental thing.
But as hockey players, because we have such a go sport, it's easy to slip into the mindset that everything has to be that, or it wasn't hard if I'm not dripping in a puddle at the end of the workout. And that's just not the case. You have to optimize for which one of these things you're working on, right? So you got anything to add to that before I go on top?
Well, what are you going to next?
I was going to talk about the it depends thing.
Okay, yeah. So the only what was I going to add to that? Yeah, we have phases, and you should have phases, or in layman's terms, it's called periodization in bodybuilding terms and stuff. But there's a reason for it too. Is your body has to adapt, and once it's done adapting, it's not going to get any better, right? So there's a time frame with time window within your summers, your off training, where you're going to build your base, so your cardio. If we spend too much time on that, we're going to look like marathon runners.
Yep.
Right. And then so we have to move to the next phase, and on purpose for the hockey season, but also to get your body to change and do something else. If we spend too much on just the strength now, and just strength, then we start to probably thicken right up, and it's not that's not what we want to do either. So it's very important to have the different phases, doing one thing all the time. So if you're always in the beatdown mode, then the beatdown is actually a neat word, because you actually will beat yourself down. Yep. You'll start getting injuries, and you'll just be tired. Your body can't sustain that all the time. So it's good to keep it, other than the purpose of training for hockey, it's good to keep things fresh too.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to actually switch the order here. I'm going to go into the force velocity thing first, because I want to finish on the depends thing.
Sure.
So this was something that I learned, I don't know, a year ago, maybe. So this is a good thing for kids to know when they're doing their training, because what's starting to become more apparent with people that I talk to and whatever is pointing out that difference between bodybuilding style training or aesthetic style training versus training for sport. And what I would say kind of the master philosophy behind in the gym training. So this is outside of your interval work and your aerobic base training. Obviously, those things are important too. But when you're in the gym and you're trying to work on one of those modalities I just talked about in that kind of setting in the gym, then everything comes down to power output. Everything is going to come down to, we're trying to increase our strength. We're trying to increase our speed so that we can maximize what our power is. Yeah. So I'm going to do a little bit of math. So bear with me. If something's confusing, you can tell me that it's confusing so I can sharpen it up. So if you're trying to develop power, people actually don't know the difference between power, force, and velocity, let's say. So terms that people know are strength. They know what strength means. Speed, they know what speed means. And then power is kind of like a difficult term to understand. It's tough to know, what does that actually mean? How do I get more powerful?
I agree.
So the equation for power is actually the force that you can produce times the velocity that you can produce it at. And that's how you get power. So power is the combination of force and velocity. So then what's force and velocity? Force can be your proxy term for strength. So the formula for force output or strength, let's say, is whatever mass you have times how fast you can move it, which would be the acceleration. That's how you get your force output. So if you're trying to train strength, a word that we can use that is with that is force. How much force can I produce? That is a proxy for how strong you are, how much strength you have.
Yeah.
So, and that's the first component of power. So you have your force. So in order to improve your power, then you need to improve how much force you can produce, which would be your strength. So that's why strength is an important component of training. For velocity is a term that you can use for speed. Yep. So velocity is the same thing as speed, but it normally implies a direction. What direction are you going? Yep. So velocity is speed plus whatever direction you're moving in. That's what velocity is. Yeah. So in order to improve your power, you need to improve your velocity. So your two metrics that you can improve is your force, which is your strength, or your velocity, which is your speed.
How fast you can move.
Right? Or the body. So the combination of those two, you multiply those two together, you get power. That's how you get your power. So when you're training for sport, those are the two levers you can pull. Am I training for strength? Am I training for speed? Am I training for the combination to train power directly? So I'm going to show a little graph here for a way that people can think about it. Loud markers. So I assume everyone has taken some kind of math class. If you're in high school, you've definitely seen this before. This is called an X and Y axis. That's what this is.
I'm so confused
I know. So X and Y axis. So on the Y axis, so the arrow going up, you have force. And on the X axis, you have velocity. Yep. So when you multiply these two, that's how you get power. So the force velocity curve looks like this. So if you can, for people that are watching.
So if I'm a dumb guy.
Yep.
And I look at that, it shows the slope going down. So it's saying the higher the force, the less quickly you're going to move it.
That's right. And then the inverse is also true. The faster you're moving it, the less force, right? So that's called an inverse relationship. So the higher you make one, the higher force, the lower the velocity. The higher the velocity, the lower the force.
Totally makes sense.
So if you look at, I'm going to use a red pen now. If you look at the velocity point versus the force point, so you can see at your maximum velocity output, your force is going to be the lowest. At your maximum At your maximum velocity, you can see that you have your lowest force.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. When you have your maximum force, you have your lowest velocity. Yeah. So they intersect at inverse points, right? So when you're training, these are the two metrics that you can work on. As you move towards the middle of the curve, that's where you're getting the highest combination of both. The highest combination of force and velocity is right in the middle, and that's what you would call your maximum power. So your maximum power output would be at the combination of those two. Yeah. So when we're training, there's different metrics that we can work on at each of these points. So just give me a second. I'm gonna write out what they are. So at the top of the curve, which would be this point, that's where you're gonna have your maximum strength, obviously, because it corresponds to your maximum force. Yeah. So you're working we're talking 90% of you're almost. Like let's say a 1 rep max.
Yeah, if you're doing a squat, you're not doing one more than one.
Yeah, you can do 1 rep basically.
So 1 rep max.
Yeah, so your velocity is going to be low.
Yeah.
The next one down, we call this strength speed. Yep. So this is where in the maximum strength modality, where you're working on just your raw strength, this is where you're doing your heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, heavy benching, everything heavy. Your big compound lifts where you're going for maximum output on your strength. So it's low reps. When you go down a step, which I have on the graph here, and also for people, you can just look up the force velocity curve on Google it, and it'll show you exactly what I'm talking about for people that are just listening. Then you have strength speed. So the reason strength is first is because we're prioritizing strength over speed, but we're adding a speed component. So this is where we're going to get more into dynamic work. So this is where we're going a little bit higher rep ranges, and we're starting to add a little bit of zip to our reps. But it's still going to be heavy. It's still going to be a heavier weight, so our force is still close to maximum.
Yep.
The next one down, this is where we go straight to our maximum power, where it's a good combination of both. It's in theory, an equal combination of force and velocity. So you're going to have, this is where you have Olympic lifts. You're going to have your cleans, your snatches, working with your kettlebells, kettlebell swings, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's where that combination comes in. One lower than that, now it's speed strength. So now we're starting to get to the velocity end of the curve. So speed,
show it on your thing.
Yeah, so speed strength is going to be right here.
Yeah.
So now we're getting higher on the velocity end of things. And this is where we're going to prioritize some speed over what our strength is. So this is where you'll get like 8 sets of 3, and you're trying to work with maximum intent to move as fast as you can. So the loads are going to be lighter, and you're just working on speed, but you still have some resistance. And then on the lowest end, as far on the velocity spectrum as we can get, that's when you're doing your body weight stuff. So you're doing speed work, sprints, plyos, whatever. So these are the different ways that you can train to improve your power, which kind of rules all in the gym. So this is how you improve your strength, how you improve your velocity, and then how you improve your power output. So just as an athlete, that is what our goal is when we're in the gym. What I'm not writing down is hitting our chest at 5 different angles, or working on our biceps, or working on how our triceps look, or how wide my back is. That is not anything I said on here.
That's right.
Right? So keep that in mind. Now our goal over time is to improve each of these modalities, and this is why you train all of them, so that the curve ends up coming out somewhere here. I don't know if that's clear. Somewhere like this. So now what that means is where you have your maximum force, it's now at a higher velocity than before. And then vice versa. At your highest velocity, it's now at a higher force. Does that make sense? Kind of?
Yeah, 100%.
Too much?
So no, it's not too much. So basically, over time, you're taking that. Let's take the squat for example. If you do a 200-pound squat, and early in your you wouldn't be doing this early, but let's say you're doing a 200-pound squat, and it takes you like to go down or to come back up from the squat. It takes you 1 full second to get it from the bottom up. That if you're getting stronger, if you work on both ends of that, you're going to take that 200 pounds and you're going to come up in half a second.
That's right.
So now you're not only stronger, you're faster.
That's right. So for
that same weight.
That's right. For an equal weight, we're moving it faster. And now at the opposite end of the spectrum, at the same speed, we can now move more weight.
That's right.
Right. So this is how we train. This is what we're training for. So all those things I just said, whether you're doing max strength, speed, power, speed, strength, or just straight speed work. All of those things, the reason we train all the modalities is because doing one helps the others. Right. And
so
that's
if you're taking a Bulgarian split squat. So if for anyone that doesn't know what that is, that's a one-legged rear elevated split squat. So you're working one leg at a time. If you can improve the strength of that Bulgarian split squat with weight, and be able to when you push up, and your intent always is to push, like to do that
push
quickly.
Quick.
If you can move that and improve that, like 20 pounds, whatever the weight is arbitrary, as they say.
Nice.
When that is not on your back, now you're moving faster because you don't have the weight.
Right on. That's exactly.
So that's why it's important that your strength is there.
That's right.
Within the intent of speed.
Exactly. So. And then when you work on something like an Olympic lift, like a clean, for example, well, you're working on the best of both at the same time. You're working on force and speed at the same time because you're trying to maximize the amount of weight you can work with, but you need to move it quick to get around it. Otherwise, you're not going to do it, right? So this is how you should be thinking. This should be your philosophy when you're in the gym training. Which one of these things am I trying to work on, right? So you need to identify on this curve that I just explained, where are you weak? Which points do you need to improve? So if you grew up on the farm and you've been baling hay since you were 5 and you're an absolute mammoth person, maybe you need to be on the speed end of the spectrum working that because you're already pretty strong. You know, on the other end, if you're one of those kids that's really wiry, fast twitch, and you're the fastest sprinter in your school, well, maybe you need to work more on the strength end of the spectrum to make that curve push outward where you're improving everything. Right. So the reason I'm laying all this out is just so you can do what we were talking about, identify where you're weak, identify where you're weak, and then you can start to work on those things. So for hockey in particular, when you're playing the actual game, in my opinion, maybe you'll disagree, you're going to be in the strength or the speed strength zone towards the just speed zone. So we're talking more on the high velocity end of the spectrum, where we're not using a lot of resistance. We're not actually exuding our maximum strength or maximum force. Everything is speed first. And then you might get into some speed strength in certain situations in the game, but you're mostly going to be playing the game in that zone. So somebody might ask, well, then why don't I just spend most of my time on that zone? Because if you do that, then you may not have, when those strength elements come up, you're not going to have the strength to be able to sustain it.
Yep.
And if you never work on your strength, you're going to hit a plateau in your speed that you can't get over.
Yep.
So if you never work on your strength, it's not the case that if you just keep working on your speed, you'll get faster and faster and faster. If you never put on muscle, if you never get stronger, if you never grow, then that speed is going to hit a limit.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? It's the same on both sides. So helping one helps the other.
Yeah.
If you never work on moving faster and you can never move a weight faster, it's going to be hard for you to get your strength up.
Yeah, you just be a dump truck.
Yeah, that's it, right? So that's why it's important. If you can identify which points you're weak at, they all help each other. Yep. And that's why you need to have a balanced training in terms of you need to make sure you're hitting everything, but unbalanced in the sense that you need to prioritize the things you need because you might already be really good at one part of the curve,
Yep.
you know, and then you can move into something else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I want to say on that. Was that clear? I feel like that was kind of a lot.
Yeah, I think it's good. If people take the time to listen to that,
yeah, it's
actually pretty important, especially in terms of what we talked about earlier about identifying what you actually need.
That's right.
Because I've always said that too. Dalton was saying that too. It's like he was when he was with Columbus one year, they asked him to stay and train and be good for him. And he said, I did it for the summer and I didn't have enough ice. Okay, there it is. Didn't have enough ice. I wanted to get on the ice more because I felt I needed to be on the ice more. And he goes, I was in the gym and I was doing my things. He goes, but I knew that whole summer, this is not what I needed. Mm-hmm. And he said it actually hurt him a little bit. Not physically hurt him, but I mean,
it didn't optimize.
Didn't injure him, but it didn't make him. It wasn't what he needed because he knows his body so well.
Yeah, it wasn't working on.
And there's a lot of times where people think like you don't want someone to determine what you need because you really know. Like not everybody, but if you know your body and you know what you need and what feels good and what doesn't, you probably should listen to it a little bit.
Yep.
You know. So
yeah, absolutely.
Like so, if you're working out with someone and they just let's say we're doing a split squat, and it's just like I don't feel good doing a split squat, and you don't just say it because. You don't say, okay, well, let's do something else. You got to dig into it a little bit as a trainer.
Yep.
But if someone's telling you, I don't feel good because of this and this, or it doesn't feel right, my whatever, maybe you can change it to a walking lunge.
Yep.
Or something like that. There's a way that your body might respond better to something.
That's right. And what I say in my program that people will be able to buy is I say that exact thing. I have like a couple pages of writing to start the program off because I want people to know that they can do that. And this is what I was talking about. So if you're given a program think about Dalton, right? So in theory, this is the best situation he could have. So he's staying in Columbus. He has somebody working directly with him. Yep. Here's a program for him.
Yeah.
But it wasn't what he needed. It wasn't what he needed. He knew that he was missing some pieces that would have helped him as an individual. Yeah. So even in that best case situation that he had, it still wasn't exactly what he needed.
This is in the NHL level.
In the NHL level. So for people that if you are someone who decides they want to use my program, for example, you can take what I have as a template, but like I said at the beginning of the podcast, you can make that individual to you. Which pieces of this are what you need, and now you can start to make those things specific. Or if it's a movement that doesn't necessarily jive with your mechanics, like some kids have a really difficult time doing a back squat because of their proportions, right?
100%.
Yeah,
and opposite of that, because I was just going to say this. You might have to work around injuries as well.
Yep. Totally.
So if you have a lot of people might not be able to do a really good front squat because they can't rack.
Yeah.
Probably
like I have the mobility
because I've got like arms like an alligator.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just my shoulders. I didn't work on that movement a lot, so I can do my cleans and stuff. But like the rack position is not good. So we do a front squat. It's like I either have to, if with a bar, I have to
do the cross
because it's just better. But now I can't get the weight that I want. But okay, let's say you're having a hard time with that. Your shoulders an injury, or you just doesn't feel right. You can. Okay, it doesn't mean you can't do a front squat anymore. Yeah. Well, what can I use? Well, there's dumbbells. Can I use a heavier dumbbell? Oh, that'll work. Or a kettlebell, right? Or a goblet squat, front squat. There's ways that you can do it.
That's right. And so this is the other thing that happens is guys will have a program or whatever, and they'll be like, "Well, I can't do that. I need to do something else," and they don't have the wherewithal or the knowledge to be able to plug something else in.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why it's important to have someone around that you can ask a question if you don't know.
Yeah.
But there's always a way There's always a way to work around it, and there's always a way to better optimize it so it's individual for you. You know? So that's all I want to say on that curve piece. My last piece I want to talk about, and this kind of is my summary of the philosophy that we've been discussing this whole time, and I've mentioned this a bunch of times before. I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to tell the story again of where I learned this. So I call it the "it depends" principle. I'm coining this now, by the way. I'm coining this. So this is a way.
You say it a certain amount of times, it's yours.
That's right. I feel like it's mine. It depends principle. I'm going to coin this because I think it just summarizes everything you need to do whenever you're trying to get better at anything.
Yeah.
So when I was in school, for people that don't know, which I've said before, I did engineering in school, and what we learned as I started to get into my higher years when we were doing our projects and actually building things and making stuff work was you can never optimize one thing without sacrificing something else. So it's like just the law of trade-offs. That's what everything is. So what we would do, we'd be sitting in class and my professor would give me an example. The example that I like to use is a filter. So in signal processing, if you're trying to send something through the air, let's say, you can send things at different frequencies, right? So there's different frequencies of signals that you can send. So to catch that thing, you don't want it to be measuring all frequencies because there's too much. There's
the filter.
Yeah, there's shit flying around all the time. So you don't want to catch everything, right? So the idea is you're filtering out frequencies of signals that you don't want. So when you send a text, that text goes out at a certain frequency. So cell phones are designed to catch certain frequencies through the antenna that's on your cell phone.
No idea.
Yeah. So every cell phone has an antenna. That's how it catches the things that are sent to it.
Okay.
So if you're outside the frequency that the antenna will catch, then it won't see it. So because there's shit flying around all the time at different frequencies. You don't want to catch everything. So if you're trying to optimize for that, a question that I would ask in class would be, okay, so if I want to design a filter, you're telling me to design a filter. How do I design it? Like what frequency should I be catching? And their answer would always be, well, it depends on what you're trying to catch.
Sure.
Right? It depends on which thing you want. Yeah. And at the start, when we were first learning about it, I had a really hard time grasping the concept of why can't you just give me a straight answer? You know, why can't you can I not just optimize for everything? Can I not just make it big enough to catch everything? And then he's like, well, yeah, but then you're going to spend X number of thousands or millions of dollars
anyways.
And you don't need all of those, right? So if you want to save some cost, then you need to cut out some of the stuff you don't need, and that'll be more cost effective for you, right? So how much money do you want to spend? And that's what they would say to me. I'd be like, well, what if we just want to catch everything? And that's what they would say to me. Well, how much money do you want to spend? So it's like, now if you want to catch more stuff, it's going to cost you more. So in the context, coming back to working out training type of stuff, everything is going to come at a cost. It comes at a cost to your resources as a person, how much energy you have, how much focus you have, how much time you have, all of that stuff. So if you're trying to optimize for certain things, it's going to come at the sacrifice of other things. So what I always say is where I start to call it the "it depends" principle, is because that's what my profs would always say to me, is it depends on what you want to optimize for. Yep. So if I need to work on speed and strength, or just speed and not strength, then I shouldn't spend an equal amount of time working on strength, because I need to work on speed. That's what I'm trying to optimize for. Yeah. So my training style and the drills that I'm doing or the workouts that I'm doing should be geared towards optimizing for speed. So what does that mean? That means maximum intent, maximum output on each of your reps, and enough rest so that you're not gassed going into your next set. That's what that means. That's how you optimize for that. If you don't do that, if you want to optimize for something else, if you want to optimize for strength, well, that means that you need to make sure that you're working at a heavy enough load where you're going close to failure on your reps, so you get the maximum stimulus on your muscles, and you take a long break in between so that you're rested enough for that. If you're trying to work on your continuous steady state aerobic base so that you can keep your heart rate elevated for a long time without getting tired, well, then get on the bike and start clipping. And that's how you work on that. But you can't do everything at once. So it depends on what you're trying to work on. Yeah. So when people ask me questions about anything, and it doesn't have to be training, it can be about anything. Like, for example, we had some videos about supplements that we put up a few weeks ago when we were talking about nutrition. Yeah. And some kids are sending, or maybe they're not kids, whoever they are, sending in messages saying, well, what's a good brand of supplement to use? And it's like, well, that's not a very good question, because I don't know what first of all, I don't know how old you are.
Depends.
Yeah, it depends, right? What are you trying to optimize for? Which ingredients are most necessary for you to have in your pre-workout?
Yeah.
What time of day are you working out? How old are you? What about all these other variables that we're talking about? That's when I can give you good advice on what you actually need. Or when, like I said at the start again, kids will write in and say, do you have any tips for me as a U16 AAA hockey player? It's like, well, it depends. What do you need to work on? Like, what deficiencies do you have? I can't give you a blanket prescription. My blanket prescription is something that's not helpful. It's going to say work hard and be consistent.
Yeah,
that's not helpful, right? That's a given, right? Standard. So what specifically do you need? So that's where I call it it depends principle, right? It depends on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to optimize for, what your goals are. And you have to take that into your training. If you're trying to develop as a professional, it doesn't even have to be in sports at all. It could be in anything. If you need to be much better at reading, then what you have to do is read books that you can understand. If you go and I give you the philosopher Plato to read, that might be a little beyond what you're capable of doing. Might confuse you. Here, go read Shakespeare. Yeah. It's like, no, actually, you just need a basic book where you can understand all the words.
Green ham and eggs.
Yeah. Start with a Dr. Seuss and then build up from that, right? So in any context, I think it's just a very good principle to understand and to think about. When you have a question about training, when you have a question about hockey, when you have a question on what should I be doing, make sure you know what you're trying to work on specifically and try to keep it as singular as possible so that you can optimize appropriately in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. When you come to a fork in a road, which road do you take? Depends.
It depends, man.
Depends on where you want to go.
That's right. So hopefully that'll be something that people can remember as a mental trigger, that it depends principle. When you're trying to plan something for yourself, keep that in mind. What are we trying to work on? What is the goal of what we're trying to do? Mm-hmm. And then you can as closely optimize for that as possible. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to finish on. You got anything else you want to throw on that?
If I go back to the Jaromir Jagr thing and the training and the purpose and all that kind of stuff, it goes back to the one statement that Dalton told Charlie, and Charlie loves it. And it's a tough one to do. Is if you're going to be dedicated, and I don't actually think anybody will be like Jaromir Jagr, and if you are, God bless you, in the Horseshoe Road and on. But my thing would be what Dalton told Charlie. He goes, do the things that aren't cool so that one day you're the coolest guy ever. And I'm sure when Jaromir was in the league and he was not going out with the guys on, when drinking and all that stuff was a little bit more prevalent. But even now, when the guys went out, that's not cool. Like, and to a point, it isn't cool. You want to be a teammate, but he did go out with them, and would he drink this stuff, right? And he would spend his hours in the gym, and people would be like, "You're nuts. You're not one of the guys." Well, who's the coolest guy now? Who gets to play pro hockey at 50 years old, and the amazing path that the amazing story that he wrote for himself, right? It wasn't maybe cool when he was 28, but man, is that a pretty cool story now?
Yep, for sure, man.
So for players out there, when you think you're missing out on something, that it's that fork in the road. Just to finish on that, which one do you want to go down? Do I want to be whatever? This fork in the road is you go have fun, which is fine, and do all the things that everybody else does. And this fork in the road is focus, and the results could be a lot better.
Yeah,
choose one.
And you're not going to see it today either. That's the hard thing. That's the hard part about it, right? Yeah. Is you don't get to see the fruits of your labor today. It might be in a year. It might be in 2 years. It might be in 5. Who knows, right?
Exactly.
But that's what makes it tough. So that's a good point to end on.
Yeah.
Okay, leave it there.